Most Cars fans have already wondered whether there will be a fourth Cars feature installment in the Cars franchise, some because they want another film, others because they don't. Regardless of what I think, there are quite a few determinants for the making of another Cars film, so I'd like to discuss the likelihood of Cars 4. When the first Cars film released, soon observers could assume this wouldn't be the last time we hear from number 95 and his motorized friends. While it wasn't Pixar's largest box office hit, Cars would show a continuous popularity. So while the majority of the studio's entries before and after Cars at least quadrupled their budget and grossed more than $600 million worldwide, Cars fared slightly less well in both regards. Unlike most of its competitors though, it garnered revenues as high as 2/3 of its worldwide gross on the US home video market, most of which it accomplished throughout its first months of release. Commercial success is the basic requirement for a sequel, and Cars met this requirement. Hence, it was only a matter of time for Cars 2 to be announced. Additionally, the sales for merchandise, diecasts in particular, have skyrocketed in 2006 already and equal $10 billion by the release of Cars 2 5 years later. Thus, Cars is a media franchise that is driven by merchandise significantly. Consequently, I will examine this aspect in my analysis too. Once Cars 2 was released, its impact would determine the development of Cars 3. The film was a box office success, and so were the two Planes spin-off films, although neither of the three films received critical acclaim. Yet, the popularity of the Mattel diecast line continued its streak, as Mattel noted in its 2013 Q1 earnings call that sales had not only grown but still remained above pre-Cars 2 levels. This is remarkable, as the film was almost 2 years old at the time, and you would expect sales to decrease again. Only with the launch of Planes, which did well according to Mattel too, sales on Cars became lower. Later on, sales for both Cars and Planes decreased, as noted in the 2014 Q4 earnings call. While not directly referring to Cars, this trend continued in the following years. Yet, the commercial success of Cars 2 and the Planes film was enough reason to do Cars 3. Additionally, the merchandise still provided a solid financial backbone that would even strengthen its relevance with another theatrical. Well, the case of Cars 3 is interesting to investigate. In terms of box office grosses, Cars 2 surpassed its predecessor by about 21%, comparable to Monster University's 28% growth over Monsters, Inc. However, all other Pixar sequels fared much better, each crossing the $1 billion mark and basically outpacing each other. Incredibles 2, for instance, left a remarkable impact, almost entirely recouping its predecessor's global box office domestically and nearly doubling it worldwide. I doubt anyone was really surprised when the development of Incredibles 3 was announced at D23 Expo. Also, Inside Out 2 has even dethroned The Lion King remake as the highest-grossing animated film of all time, with an incredible $1.6 billion. Cars 3, on the other hand, fell behind both Cars and Cars 2, grossing merely $384 million on its $175 million budget. Studios receive about 50% of these revenues, yet while they also record earnings from video sales, distributional and marketing costs increase the total expenses, technically making Cars 3 a box office bomb. What is crucial to note is that the domestic box office had already declined for Cars 2, but whereas the former had a significant growth on the international market, Cars 3 experienced a decline in almost every country. However, it received general positive reviews by both critics and viewers. I assume the only reason it has never been labeled a bomb is that merchandise sales have done very well. As early as 2016, Mattel announced they expected an incremental $350 million in revenues, later readjusted to $300 million plus. In fact, Cars 3 came within range for our, Mattel's, revenue target. The 2017 Q4 earnings call states, while Mattel also emphasized that Cars, as a staple of the toy industry, delivered the most volume growth of any licensed property in the US. Consequently, Cars 3 has taught us 3 lessons. First, it improved the franchise's reputation, as critics were far more positive in their reviews compared with Cars 2 or the Planes films. Second, its poor box office performance showed the tailwind for the films had faded. Third, it proved Cars is still a top seller as far as toys are concerned. This becomes more evident in comparison to Toy Story. According to some sources, Toy Story allegedly made $10 billion in merchandise sales. Even if this holds, Toy Story merch had broadly vanished by 2015 when the remaining toys had just collected lots of dust and were put on sale as a result. Even though Mattel's 2020 investor presentation referred to a growth in action figures driven by Toy Story 4, I remember those figures being put on extreme sale quite soon and Lego sets being discontinued as well. Back in 2017, when Cars 3 released, the commercially low performance would hinder the development of a fourth film, as the central requirement for a sequel was not met. The faded tailwind made Cars 4 simply unlikely. In spite of that, I argue that relative failure was only an initial phenomenon. Cars 3 didn't attract vast amount of moviegoers because of the following reasons. To start with, at least some people may abstain from watching because of the bad reception of previous entries in the franchise. Additionally, the Planes movies appeared more childish and simple, hence people may have cast doubt on the appeal of Cars 3. More importantly, complex dynamics determine the pattern of Cars fans, also in regard to other Pixar properties. Toy Story 3 released 11 years after the second film. Its themes of maturing and opening new doors perfectly resonated with those who grew up with the films in the 1990s and who were themselves now already grown up. Nostalgia played a huge role in the success of the film, and when Toy Story 4 came out in 2019, the franchise had manifested its position as a cult classic. Finding Nemo and The Incredibles both being among the most acclaimed and simultaneously first ever animated features had a similar status. We can't ignore that Cars 3 is similar to Toy Story 3 in terms of its themes. Also, the gap between Cars and Cars 3 spans 11 years, equal to how much time lay between Toy Story 2 and 3. However, the Cars franchise advanced with much more pace. 3 films and 2 spin-off films can be tracked in the same period. Only 3 Toy Story films were made. As a matter of fact, original Cars fans were just about to grow out of Cars instead of being grown up already, so they would not be affected so much by nostalgia. Besides, Toy Story 3 has always been considered the best ending to the franchise by a broad majority of fans, excluding myself. In contrast, the approval to Cars 3 has only risen the more time has passed since the film's release. Also, in retrospect, fans have been increasingly benevolent towards Cars 2. Hence, the fans of these franchises may really tick differently. Nostalgia may just emerge as a relevant catalyst of the success of the Cars franchise. However, there are some positive implications that can be drawn from Cars 3 too. Directly, we should cite the increased diecast sales in 2017. More importantly though, there are some indirect implications. Cars 3 both realigned previous and recruited new fans and collectors. I pointed out how the first Cars film continued its popularity through its performance on the home media market that emerged as a time-delayed source of success. The film released in the DVD era. Its high home media sales can be attributed to 2 main currents of customers: those who watched it theatrically and were highly impressed, and those who had become fans because of the merchandise. I assure you the popularity of the diecast line and other toys boosted the DVD sales significantly because it had attracted later fans who hadn't seen the film before. I argue that Cars 3 had similar dynamics, but the time-delayed effect is harder to discern. It released in the streaming era. Many people abstain from buying DVDs and Blu-rays because films will be obtained digitally, and they'll be available for free on Netflix or Amazon Prime eventually. Cars 3 would only be among dozens of new entries there, making it harder to track its resonance with viewers. Disney Plus works differently. It is the go-to platform to check what Disney fans really like. Its array of top 10 films is much more stable than those of its competitors, but it didn't exist back in 2017, so we could track the film's popularity there. Nevertheless, we all know some Cars fans who have regained their interest in cars and only restarted collecting after the release of Cars 3. Also, the merchandise presence has definitely attracted new fans that contributed to the increased sales in Mattel's Cars line. Most of those new and realigned fans have not seen the film in theaters because both of the absence of mass nostalgia and the previously mentioned time delay factor. The latter was then harder to track because of the new dynamics of the streaming era. All these implications play into the lessons I've drawn from Cars 3, and in fact those takeaways have both been proven in the years since the release of the film and probably evoked additional implications for Pixar in terms of the future of the Cars franchise. They determined how it would be continued and whether a fourth Cars film will be made. You may dislike to be left with a cliffhanger, but that's what we'll talk about in part 2 of this video. As of now, thanks for watching and make sure to join the discussion on my profound thoughts.